There's this moment in every investor's life where the math stops making sense. You check your brokerage account on a random Tuesday, your portfolio gained $12,000 in a single day, and you realize that's more than you contributed in the last 6 months combined. Your money just made more money than you did. That's not investing anymore. That's compounding, doing the heavy lifting while you're sitting there wondering if you even need to keep making contributions. Some people hit this point at $300,000 invested, others at $500,000. Some never notice it happen at all because they're too busy reading articles about the next hot stock pick. But here's the uncomfortable question nobody wants to ask out loud. If your portfolio is growing faster than you can contribute to it, why are you still sacrificing to max out that 401k every year? I'm going to walk you through exactly when this crossover happens, why it feels psychologically impossible until it's staring you in the face, and what it means for how you should actually be thinking about money once you cross that line. Because the moment your contributions stop mattering is the same moment most people make their biggest financial mistakes. Think about a seesaw. On one side, you've got your annual contributions, the cash you're grinding out, the bonuses you're saving, the side hustle money you're funneling into index funds. On the other side, you've got portfolio growth, the 7% annual average, the compound interest, the quiet accumulation of wealth while you sleep. Early in your investing life, your side of the seesaw is slammed to the ground. You're carrying all the weight. Your contributions are everything. But every year, a little more weight shifts to the other side. And then one year, probably without you even noticing, the seesaw tips. The growth side hits the ground. Your money is now working harder than you are. That tipping point is what I call the crossover point. And it's not some fuzzy feel-good milestone. It's a mathematical inevitability that changes everything about how you should approach wealth building. Let me give you the simple version first. If you're investing $20,000 a year and your portfolio is sitting at $100,000, your contributions are doing almost all the work. That portfolio grows 7% in a year, you're looking at $7,000 in gains. Your $20,000 in contributions is still the main character in this story. But now, let's say your portfolio hits $500,000. 7% growth on that is $35,000. Your $20,000 contribution suddenly looks small, irrelevant, almost. The seesaw tipped. Here's where it gets interesting. Most people never adjust their behavior after the seesaw tips. They keep maxing out retirement accounts, keep making sacrifices, keep operating like they're still in the accumulation phase where every dollar matters. And look, I'm not saying contributions don't matter, but the psychology of money says that once compounding is doing the heavy lifting, the highest value use of your next dollar might not be throwing it into an index fund. Let me tell you about a guy I know who runs a small manufacturing business. By the time he was 41, he'd built his portfolio up to about $600,000. Good saver, not flashy, just consistent. He kept maxing out his 401k every year, kept putting away another $10,000 into a taxable brokerage account. But his business was stuck. He needed to buy a piece of equipment that would cut his production time in half. Cost was $80,000. He didn't want to take a loan, didn't want to tap his investments, so he kept grinding, kept saving for the equipment, while also maxing out his retirement accounts. Took him 2 more years to afford the equipment. In those 2 years, his portfolio grew from $600,000 to about $750,000, mostly from market returns. He contributed another $40,000 total. Meanwhile, his business stayed stagnant because he didn't have the equipment. If he'd pulled that $80,000 from his taxable account when his portfolio hit $600,000, bought the equipment, his business revenue would have doubled. He would have made that $80,000 back in less than a year, plus increased profits every year after. But he was still thinking like someone on the wrong side of the seesaw. His contributions mattered more than his growth. Except they didn't anymore. The math had changed, but his psychology hadn't. This is the core tension. The habits that get you to the crossover point are not the same habits that maximize wealth after you cross it. Now, you're probably thinking, okay, so when exactly does this crossover happen? And the answer is, it depends on 2 variables. How much you're saving every year and what return you're capturing. The more you save, the longer it takes for growth to outpace you. If you're putting away $40,000 a year, you might not hit the crossover point until your portfolio is at $700,000 or $800,000. If you're saving $10,000 a year, the crossover might happen at $150,000. It's not a universal number. It's a ratio. Your annual contribution divided by your portfolio size multiplied by your expected return. Once that growth number is consistently bigger than your contribution number, you've crossed. Let's walk through a realistic scenario. You're 35 years old. You make $90,000 a year. You're saving $20,000 annually, capturing about 7% returns. At $100,000 invested, your growth is $7,000 a year. Your contributions are still doing almost 75% of the work. At $200,000, growth is $14,000. Contributions are still doing 60% of the work. At $300,000, growth is $21,000. Now you're basically even. At $400,000, growth is $28,000. It's now doing more than you are. At $500,000, growth is $35,000. You've definitively crossed. If you stopped contributing entirely at this point, compounding alone would double your portfolio to $1 million in just over 10 years, assuming that same 7% return. But here's the part that should honestly make you uncomfortable. If you kept contributing that $20,000 every year all the way to $1 million, it would take you about 23 years from zero. If you stopped at $500,000, it takes about 26 years total to hit $1 million. That's 3 extra years. 3 years in exchange for freeing up $20,000 annually. That's $60,000 of liquidity you could deploy elsewhere. Start a business, buy real estate, invest in your skills, take a year off to reorient your career. The crossover point isn't just about math. It's about optionality. And this is where people get mad at me, because what I'm describing sounds like I'm telling you to stop investing. I'm not. I'm telling you that the marginal value of your next dollar into a tax-advantaged account decreases dramatically after the crossover point, while the opportunity cost of not having that liquidity increases. This is a systems thinking problem. The system that got you to $500,000 is not optimized for getting you from $500,000 to $5 million. There's this concept in early retirement circles called coast fire. The idea is you save aggressively until you hit a number where compounding alone will carry you to your retirement goal by your target retirement age. Then you stop. You coast. Let's say you want $2 million by age 65. You're 30 years old. You need to hit about $187,000 invested right now. Let it compound at 7% and it'll grow to $2 million by 65 without another dollar contributed. Most people hear that and think it's either impossible or irresponsible. But it's just math. The real question is whether you want to spend the next 35 years optimizing for the safest possible path or the highest expected value path. And here's the thing. If you're the kind of person who can save $187,000 by age 30, you're probably also the kind of person who can create value in other ways. The opportunity cost of locking up every spare dollar in index funds might be higher than the marginal safety you're buying. I want to be clear. I'm not saying sell your portfolio and start a crypto trading bot. I'm saying that after the crossover point, your human capital, your ability to earn, learn, and create becomes the higher leverage investment. And most people never make that mental shift. They keep feeding the seesaw that's already tipped. Let me give you the second uncomfortable truth. The people who tell you to never stop contributing, to always max out your retirement accounts no matter what, those people have an incentive structure that doesn't align with yours. Financial advisors get paid on assets under management. The more you contribute, the more they manage, the more they make. Vanguard and Fidelity want you contributing forever because that's their revenue model. They're not lying to you. The advice isn't wrong. It's just not optimized for your outcome. It's optimized for their outcome. This is the part where people call me cynical, but I call it reading the incentives. If your financial advisor's income goes up when you contribute more, then their advice is going to trend toward contributing more. It's not a conspiracy. It's just how systems work. Now, here's a case study with real numbers. Let's say you're 42 years old. You've got $420,000 invested and you're contributing $18,000 a year. You've basically hit the crossover point. Your portfolio is growing about $29,000 a year at 7%, assuming average returns. Your contribution is $18,000. You're on the other side. Now, you've been thinking about switching careers, moving into a role that would cut your income by $30,000 a year, but would give you skills that could triple your income in 5 years. Classic risk-reward trade-off. But you don't want to stop contributing to your retirement accounts. So you stay in the job you hate. 5 years later, your portfolio has grown to about $700,000. You contributed $90,000 over those 5 years. Your portfolio growth added another $190,000. Compounding did twice the work you did. Meanwhile, you're still in a job you hate, and you missed the window to make the career switch. Alternatively, let's say you make the switch, stop contributing entirely, and focus on building the new skill set. 5 years later, your portfolio still grew to about $590,000 from compounding alone, even without contributions. But now you're in a new career, making double what you used to, and you have the option to start contributing again at a much higher rate, or deploy that capital into opportunities that didn't exist before. The point is, the crossover point is where the math of financial advice breaks. The standard advice optimizes for portfolio size. But portfolio size is a proxy for financial security. And after the crossover point, there are often better ways to buy security than cramming more money into index funds. Here's the third thing. The crossover point is different for everyone, and it shifts based on market conditions. In 2008, a lot of people thought they'd crossed. Then the market dropped 40%, and suddenly their contributions mattered again. In 2021, people crossed way earlier than they expected because the market ran up 30%. The seesaw tips, but it can tip back. That's the volatility risk that nobody talks about. When you're relying on compounding to do the heavy lifting, you're also exposed to sequence of returns risk. If you stop contributing right before a bear market, you just locked in a lower base for compounding to work on. This is why crossing the crossover point doesn't mean you stop thinking. It means you start thinking differently. You start asking whether the opportunity cost of liquidity is worth the marginal safety of another year of contributions. Let me hit you with a statistic that should reframe how you think about this. According to the Federal Reserve's Survey of Consumer Finances, the median retirement account balance for families aged 55 to 64 is about $134,000 as of 2022. That's the median. Half of people approaching retirement have less than that. Meanwhile, the people who hit the crossover point in their 30s or 40s are in the top 10% of wealth accumulators. If you're even reading this script, you're probably in that category, which means the standard financial advice isn't written for you. It's written for the median. And the median is not crossing over. The median is barely contributing. The advice to max out your 401k every year forever is good advice for someone who's not going to do it anyway. It's not optimized advice for someone who's already done it for 15 years and has $500,000 invested. Now, let's talk about the psychological shift. There are 3 phases of investing. Phase 1, you are the engine. Every dollar you save matters. Every contribution is the primary driver of portfolio growth. Your job is to maximize your savings rate and be as consistent as possible. This is the grind phase. Phase 2, you and compounding are partners. Your contributions still matter, but growth is catching up. This is where most people are when they have between $200,000 and $500,000 invested, depending on their contribution rate. You're starting to see your account jump by thousands of dollars in a day, and it feels good. Phase 3, compounding is the engine. Your contributions are now secondary. Growth is doing the work. This is when you need to shift your mindset from accumulation to optimization. And most people never make that shift. They stay in phase 1 psychology even when they're in phase 3 reality. Here's the brutal part. If you don't make the psychological shift, you end up over saving. You end up with $2 million at 65 and realize you could have retired at 55 with $1.2 million and been just as secure. You gave up 10 years of freedom for $800,000 you didn't need. I know people are going to say there's no such thing as over saving. And maybe that's true if your only goal is to have the biggest number possible when you die. But if your goal is to maximize life satisfaction, then yes, there is absolutely such a thing as oversaving. Every dollar you lock away is a dollar you can't use for optionality today. And optionality today, when you're 45 and healthy and sharp, is worth more than optionality at 75. Let me give you another angle on this. The crossover point is also the point where your biggest risk shifts. Before the crossover, your biggest risk is not saving enough. After the crossover, your biggest risk is a catastrophic portfolio loss or a sustained bear market. This is why crossing over should trigger a conversation about risk management, not just contribution rates. If compounding is now doing most of the work, you need to protect the base it's compounding on. That might mean getting more conservative with your asset allocation. That might mean diversifying into uncorrelated assets. That might mean buying insurance products you didn't need before. But most people don't think about it that way. They just keep doing what they've always done. Here's the funny thing. Once you cross the crossover point and you start to see compounding work, it becomes addictive. You start checking your portfolio more. You start running projections. You start thinking about early retirement. And that's when the people who haven't crossed yet start to resent you. There's this weird cultural thing where talking about investment returns past a certain portfolio size makes you sound like a brag. But it's not a brag. It's just math. If you have $600,000 invested and the market has a good year, you made more money than most people's salaries without doing anything. That's not a moral statement. It's a systems outcome. The system is designed to reward capital. And once you have enough capital, the system starts working for you instead of you working for the system. Now, some of you are sitting there thinking, cool, but I'm nowhere near the crossover point. What do I do? The answer is you maximize contributions, you stay consistent, and you ignore all the noise. The first $100,000 is the hardest. There's a reason Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger always said the first 100,000 is a grind. Because it is. At 100,000 invested, even a great year only nets you 10 or 15,000 in gains. That's not enough to feel like compounding is working. You still feel poor. But once you cross 100,000, things start to accelerate. And the acceleration is non-linear. Going from 100,000 to 200,000 feels faster than going from 0 to 100,000, even though it's the same dollar amount. Because now compounding is kicking in. Let me tell you about milestones that actually matter. The first 10,000 invested, this is psychological. It proves you can do it. The first 100,000 invested, this is where compounding starts to feel real. You're getting 4-figure gains in good months. The crossover point, wherever that is for you. This is where growth consistently beats contributions. This is the inflection point. The point where your portfolio generates more annually than your job pays you. This one is wild. The first time you see your portfolio grow by more than your salary in a single year, it breaks your brain a little bit. You realize you're not trading time for money anymore. You're watching money make money. And the final milestone, the point where your portfolio can sustain your entire lifestyle indefinitely. This is financial independence. You don't have to work. You might choose to, but the math says you're free. Here's the part nobody tells you. The crossover point doesn't feel like you think it will. You'd think it would feel like a victory, like you made it, but it doesn't. It feels anticlimactic because you're still going to work every day. You're still paying bills. Nothing externally changed. The only thing that changed is a number on a screen got big enough that the math tipped. But your life looks the same. And that's the weirdest part. Financial milestones are invisible. Nobody knows you crossed over except you. There's no ceremony, no medal, just a quiet realization one day when you're looking at your annual returns and you think, I didn't really need to contribute this year. Now, let's get to the 3 practical takeaways. First, calculate your personal crossover point. Take your annual contribution amount and divide it by your expected return rate. That's the portfolio size where growth will equal contributions. For most people, investing $20,000 a year expecting 7%, That's around $286,000. Once you're past that, you've crossed. Second, after you cross, shift your focus from contribution rate to opportunity cost. Every dollar you contribute is a dollar you're not deploying elsewhere. Ask yourself, is maxing out my 401k the highest value use of this capital, or is there a better move? Third, protect the base. Once compounding is doing the work, your job is to not screw it up. That means avoiding leverage, avoiding concentration risk, and avoiding the temptation to chase returns. Boring wins after the crossover. The uncomfortable truth is that most financial advice is designed to get you to the crossover point, not to help you figure out what to do after. And the people giving the advice often haven't crossed themselves. They're working off theory, not experience. I've been managing money long enough to see both sides. The grind to get there and the weird psychological shift that happens after. And I'll tell you this, the people who win long-term are the ones who recognize the shift and adjust. The ones who lose are the ones who keep playing the accumulation game after the game already changed. Lazy investing built more fortune than crypto memes.